Hello.
In a moment.
Live.
And we are live.
Oh.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, this evening, this morning. I'm your host, Bridgetti Banda from Cape Town in South Africa, and I'm going to ask the other ladies to introduce themselves. Our topic for today is discipline in the home and how we do that in the face of the generation of young people we have today who have grown up with some sense of entitlement. And we're going to delve into that. But before we get going, each of the ladies here are going to introduce themselves and tell you where we are from. Mary, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I am Mary Elizabeth Jackson, and I am in the USA in Tennessee.
Welcome, Mary.
Hi,
Kathy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kathy Daniels, and I'm from the Reading area, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the show. Sarah?
Hello, I am Sarah Wiseman, and I am from Brisbane, Australia.
Welcome to the show. Donna-Marie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Donna-Marie from England. Hi, girls.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
We're missing one.
We are. Emily is on tour for a whole month. Lucky girl, isn't she?
Yeah.
She's on the road. She's busy promoting a new show called Alien something. What is it called again?
Aliens on Safari.
There we go. So that's what Emily's doing. Like, yay for Emily. I totally admire her.
So go to Twitter and follow her. Aliens on Safari.
Absolute. Yes. Go, Emily. So today, we are discussing a very, 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 very thorny issue, aren't we?
I like where you put that. Thorny issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know. I think, as parents, we all deserve medals. We absolutely deserve, and as women in particular, because we are the keepers of the home, aren't we? We deserve medals.
The majority of us are the keepers, right? There are some men out there, right?
Right.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. To be fair, to be absolutely fair, and let's be fair. So I'm going to open up the topic. We are all moms in the group, right? Some of us have got sons, some of us have got daughters, some of us are privileged to have boys and girls. And I think one thing we all realize is that our children are all individuals, and the way that we have to discipline them and the way that they receive discipline is very different because each child is different. But we have a unique challenge. I mean, when I'm going to open up with how things are for me. When I grew up, corporal punishment was totally acceptable. Mm-hmm. My dad used to belt me. My mom used to belt me from a dizzy height. If I could just think about being cheeky and she would totally slap me through my face. It was not even a thought, so I didn't dare being cheeky because I knew I would get swiped. And when I was at school, for example, those days corporal punishment was okay at school. And looking back, I don't agree with everything that was permitted within the school, but I'm also not completely pro removing corporal punishment altogether. Everything with balance, right? Because if I came home and I told my mom or dad that I was punished at school, I better not even flipping tell them because I would get punished at home too. It's like, what did you do wrong? But things have changed in an unbalanced manner now, whereas when kids come home from school and they say I got into trouble, mom or dad will fly outside of the door, run over to the school and want to attack the poor teacher who may have had circumstances that you totally are not aware of. How's that worked for you guys?
Hot topic.
Should we talk about our own sort of upbringing? Because that brings it in nicely, Bridgetti, like you were saying, the way that our parents parented us. So
I think so, because you know what?
It's interesting.
Whether we like it or not, it totally influences how we parent, right?
Yeah, because I feel as though we either go completely the opposite because we're like, well, there's no way I'm doing that with my children. Or some people just adopt the exact same theories with their kids and practice what their parents, did with them. So we'll talk about everybody's history on how they were parented. Mine were much the same as yours, Bridgetti. So we had privets, bushes outside on the front lawn. And if you were bad or if you said something wrong, Mum would just get this privet and rip it off with, sheer strength, and you would get lashed on the legs. And so that mostly happened with my elder brothers, and she had a lot of kids. So, I got away. I didn't get away with it. I just don't think they were more naughty. They sort of did things that riled her enough to get the bush. Enough to get the thrashing. But no holding back with this bush, you just got a branch and she'd hit the legs with it. And the same with, I think we've discussed before about the bars of soap, and if you did bad language or spoke in a bad way, you would literally get your mouth washed out with a bar of soap.
Me too. Yep.
Yeah.
So how did things work for you? Yeah, I can imagine. So Mary, how did things work for you?
Okay. Well, it was my mom did the whole mouth soap thing. If you were, bad or like, can y'all? Yes,
Mary.
Yes, ma'am.
There's a train track. There's a train coming. Can you hear it?
Airplane.
Oh wow. Okay.
Here, hold on. Okay.
Okay, I think Kathy, would you like to go next, and we'll wait for the thing to pass.
Yes, my mother did probably most of the disciplining because my dad was usually at work. But her favorite thing was the belt. So she would get the belt. But the problem with my mother is she would fly off the handle very easily. So she mostly disciplined, I think, through anger. There were times where looking back, she went overboard. Now, if my dad was home, kind of the same thing would happen as well. I think there was a lot of stress in my parents' marriage that I totally didn't realize. I can look back now and I can see it. So, yes, they did believe in that, but there's one thing that we never did, and I don't think they even promoted it in schools, was call somebody if you feel unsafe. Here's a number to call if you want to talk. Here's a number you can call if if you disagree with the way your parents are disciplining you. Like, that's the way I feel things have changed so much. There is no fear because they know that they can use it against you. And I can tell you what happened with our story, when you get to that point.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Mary, has your noise passed? Okay, we've got no sound from you at the moment, Mary. Sarah, could you go ahead and tell us about your experience in the meantime while Mary sorts out her sound?
Yes, I was a lot like Donna-Marie, where I had two older brothers and I would kind of take notes and be like, okay, don't do that, I won't do that. I think girls different kinds of trouble anyway. Ours is more sassy attitude kind of thing rather than disobedience. That was my case anyway. But my parents would always send us to a bedroom, and we'd have to wait, and we knew the smack was coming. And so we'd just have to like sit there. And I actually don't feel like I was traumatized by the way I was disciplined as a child. I didn't feel like it was out of control. And the reason my dad would send us to our room was so he wouldn't do it out of anger. So apparently he would take a moment and then wait until he'd calm down or whatever. And then he would come in and be like, okay, what's happened? And then we'd have to bend over. It was actually worse that way because you knew it was coming and it gave you time to think about like, oh. And when my mum would discipline us, my brother would sit us down and be like, okay, so we know it doesn't hurt when mum does it, okay? So you got to like cry really hard.
So you practiced your crying before you did it?
She has great acting skills.
She would coach us how to like make her think it was so bad she had to stop. It was quite good. So all my mom would do the wait till your father gets home, and then you had all day to like wait. Chaos. But
that was the worst, isn't it? When you like you've got this anticipation building up. It's like, can we just get over with this discipline now so we can move along?
Yeah. Actually, thinking about Sarah, the way her father handled it, in reality, that's the best way, and that's complete opposite of the way my mother handled it.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that. I'm that him and Mum had the wisdom to do it.
Okay, so before we ask Mary for her experience, I would like to let all our viewers know that Sarah will be monitoring all the comments today. So if you have any thoughts, suggestions on how you do things, please share that in the comments, and Sarah will be monitoring that for us. Mary, let's see if your speakers work. Let's hear your experience. I can't hear Mary. I think possibly it's a loose connection going on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll come into the camera and talk to you. Okay. So my dad used the belt, but rarely. My mom was really very quiet. Very often used the soap if she had to. That was kind of her thing. And the pinching, the pinching, and the snapping, and pulling over the car on the interstate till we all shut up and quit arguing. And then they still use the paddle in middle school when I was in middle school. So that happened one time for being late to class. I couldn't believe I got the paddle, but I did. So that was really horrifying. And I'm sure back in those days, that would have been the 70s. Yeah, well, maybe the 80s, early 80s, whatever. You were not, there was no calling the parents to let them know your kid was getting paddled. Probably just went home with a note, So the thought of my dad spanking us was, that was enough. Like what you said, we'd go to the room, have to wait. And that was just terrifying. My grandmother would take my mother out to the little orange tree in her yard and make her pick her own switch and then use it on her. And I mean, my mom was a really, I can't imagine her getting in trouble, But one time my dad, to punish me, he made me bite into a raw onion, and that was my punishment. And I was like, so I don't eat raw onions to this day. You can imagine there's probably something psychological there. They have to be cooked. I can't eat them raw. But I've not used some of the tactics that my parents have used on my own kid. And luckily enough for my littlest, all we have to do is mention the timeout chair, and he's like, no. So it works pretty good with him, thank goodness, because holy cow, I've watched other people's children, and there's nothing that works with their kids. Nothing. Yeah. It's awful.
I'd say in the comments.
Do you mind me asking, what's a paddle, Mary?
Oh, the paddle is a like a. Do y'all have ping? You have ping pong, right? You have ping pong, tennis, table tennis. So a paddle like that, but really thick wood.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Ouch.
Ouch.
Anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. In the comments, Julie has just said we were spanked with tree switches. I think that's what you were talking about, Donna-Marie. And then she said Christian households spare the rod and all. So I think that's referencing the scripture in Proverbs that says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child," which we also grown up with that, which kind of means if you don't discipline your children, they're going to be spoiled, and
you end up with a rotten apple.
Well, so you have to beat them with nature's branch. Is that what you do?
See, that's what's starting to happen today, and I'm seeing this backlash happening with my own kids. Is that we're not sparing the rod, but the problem is we're threatened with children and youth.
Yeah.
Something that could actually destroy our future.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom had using psychology in her background. She said to me when my girls were younger, you absolutely have to say no. Children want to hear no, whether they fight you and fight you and fight you, because that gives them their sense of boundaries, and they need to know how far they can push. They do not want to be the grown-up. They want you to be the grown-up. So even though they fight you, you have to say no. And that has always, that's always stuck with me. And even, Kathy and I are dealing with teenagers. DM is, Emily is, and it's, you have to kind of redefine over and over and over again. As the kids grow up, you got to redefine what those boundaries are and where you say no. And, some things obviously are, legit adamant no. It never changes since they're toddlers. But we have to kind of keep redefining, and it's so difficult. What's okay? What are all the proper rules with the phone and the iPad and all this crap that we didn't have when we were kids that nobody was having to worry and deal with about? So we constantly are having to redefine our parenting. It really is a challenge.
That's true. Yeah. I was good. Go ahead, B.
One thing I reinforced early on in my parenting was I made my children understand that we're not friends.
No, I have girlfriends.
I have girlfriends. I have other friends, but my children are not my friends. Look, my children are adults now, so we are friends. But when I was parenting them as young people, I made them understand that I am not their friend. I am here, my job on the earth to them, my responsibility to them is to parent them and to love them. And in disciplining, the one thing I always made sure with my children is that they understood I was disciplining them because I loved them. So whatever the method of discipline was, they needed to separate the discipline from love. In other words, I needed to reinforce along with the discipline that I loved them. So even if I needed to spank them, I would reassure them and hug them afterwards. I'm doing this because I don't want you to make mistakes and I still love you. It was the one thing I really, really wanted to emphasize. But we have unique challenges now. We've got things like Childline. We've got stuff like social services. And a lot of parents feel that they are disempowered because of stuff like Childline and because of stuff like social services. We understand that there are some parents who've been completely unbalanced and who shouldn't be parents in the first place, who are belting their children to the extent that they are physically and emotionally harming them. And those people, their children need protection from that. But not all parents are like that. Not all parents are unbalanced. Not all parents discipline out of anger. And for some reason, governments seem to have taken this blanket decision to tell us how to parent or how not to parent. I understand that the rights of children need to be protected, but there needs to be some kind of a balance, right? We all have different circumstances in our homes. We have different reasons why we choose a particular style of parenting, and that power shouldn't be removed from us. And I don't think protecting the child should interfere with that. What I personally have noticed is there's this we've moved away from a society where, that saying where it says it takes a village to raise a child. And I firmly believe in that.
Oh, yeah.
But for some reason, everyone's got this attitude, well, it's not my child.
Yeah.
It's their problem. So if you see something happening, you kind of, well, yay, not my problem, not my child. It's not in my backyard. And maybe that's where things have started to go wrong as a society. We are failing our children as a society. Everybody's child matters. Everybody's child needs your care and love and protection. And you should look out not only for your own flesh and blood, but you should look out for every single child on the face of the earth. I feel strongly about that.
You know what I think is happening, at least what seems to be happening around here, is like you said, the whole thing with parents being the child's friend. A lot of people around here seem to be wrapped up in themselves, letting the kids pretty much free reign, not checking social media, just not really paying attention to what their kids are truly doing. They seem to be quick to point out what your child is doing opposed to their own children.
Yes.
That happens to be going on around here. So it's like, we aren't even doing that. It takes a village to raise a child, because people no longer seem to want to look out for even their own child, what they're doing. And that whole thing, I think, Bridgetti, you were talking about when a school goes to the parent and says, hey, your child was doing this. Oh, no, not my child. What did the teacher do? That's the mentality that's going on around here too. And anytime my child has been called out for doing something, I'm all for the school. Give them a detention. Let them see that you mean business. And they're actually refreshed by that, because they get a load of parents that will be like, well, not my child. My child didn't do that. He wouldn't do that. She wouldn't do that.
Kathy, we're really failing. We're really failing what you're talking about on teaching our kids responsibility and having to deal with consequences. I think that's really seems to be falling off the wagon in I think our country and our world as a whole. I don't know. I mean, it's not everywhere, but it seems like nobody wants to say no anymore, and nobody. Everybody's so tired and stressed. It just, oh God, now I got to go punish my kid. Now what I got to do? What's the right thing to do? And what if I'm too harsh? And and I mean, we're just, it's really challenging, and not enough kids who know, and not enough kids are having to deal with consequences. Now I tell you, go ahead.
You and Kathy have totally nailed it there. There's a complete lack of consequences. Kids are not learning, or they're not being taught that for every action, there's a reaction and a consequence.
Yes.
And unless we allow them to feel the consequences of their choices, how will they learn?
They won't.
If we try and shield them or protect them from the consequences, they're not going to learn. And let's face it, that's what life is about as an adult, right?
Yeah.
Everything we do has got a consequence. So if we're not teaching our children from a very young age that you can make any choice you like, you can bang down the door, you can break down the door if you like. But breaking down the door is going to give you sore knuckles. It's going to injure your hand. You're going to have a broken door that somebody needs to replace or fix. And there's a cost to that, not only the cost of the door, but the cost of the labor. So yes, go ahead, bang down the door, but there's going to be a consequence to that.
Right.
And I think a lot of you are obviously dealing with teenagers at the moment, but I think it starts in the stage where I'm at with toddlers. And like, I'm actually one of the only mums I know that actually disciplines their toddler. A lot of mums I know don't even do timeout, and definitely don't thank their child. And I I feel bad. I feel like the odd one out a lot of the time. And I know it's because people are tired and everything, but like you touched on it for a second there, Mary, I think there's a lot of guilt parenting happening. And there's all these articles about how boundaries are destroying their psychology and how, you know, if you smack your child, you're damaging their psychology. And there's all this thing like you're ruining your child if you discipline them. But I see the opposite happening a lot of the time. Like you said, Mary, children need boundaries. And when they have none, they just rule the household. And I don't think a child is made to carry that responsibility to be in charge of a household. Like,
oh gosh, no.
My daughter is so much happier when she hears the word no. It sometimes might take a day. I can tell when I've stopped saying no to her or I've negotiated far too long, because she gets out of control. She starts just literally walking around the house just crying and whinging, and it's like she's looking for a boundary. And I go, okay, I need to get because like you said, Mary, I've been tired or we've been busy, and I realize she's feeling out of control, and I will spend a day and she might sit in that timeout chair like 4 times in half an hour. But it takes a day of just cracking down and saying, actually, no, I'm in charge and you can feel safe because I'm but just completely, like when I've spent that time investing in her, I also spend time sitting with her and playing with her. Like it's not all about discipline, but she's such a happy kid. And people always say to me, you're so lucky. Oh, you're so lucky with her. You're so lucky. But I feel like some of it has to do with the fact we've worked our butts off to show her that she can't do whatever she wants. Because we always parent based on a thing of like, if it's not okay, if it wouldn't be okay for her to do when she's 15, it's not okay now. So if she can't throw her food at the walls when she's 15 years old, I'm not going to sit here when she's 3 and go, oh, she's just a toddler. Like, it's not actually fair for me to turn around in 5 years and go, I know I've allowed that all this time, but now it's not okay to hit people. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? That's anyway.
You're 100% correct there, Sarah. You know, I've often said to people, if you get a kid that comes to your home and they throw their food all over the floor, and then the parents go, you know, ooh, so sorry, you know, my child doesn't normally do that. But guess what? That's usually an indication that it's allowed at home. You know, and children pick up on double standards. If you're not teaching something at home, you can't expect a different result when they're in public or at someone else's home. So you're 100% correct, Sarah. A good child, look, we don't get good children, but a well-disciplined and well-mannered child happens by design. It doesn't happen by accident.
Well, we're training them. We're training them. We're training a human being. And if you look at research, it shows that, you know, a human being cannot make a complete 100% sound decisions till they're 25 years old, because that's when the frontal lobe is fully developed, or the lobe, you know, the lobes are fully developed. And we joke about that, Kathy, don't we? We need some frontal lobe with our teenagers. But, you know, if that's the case, then how can we expect, you know, our kids to make sound decisions? I mean, you know, I've got one who's an honor society student, but I came in and she was drying the dishes off with the hot pad, you know, that's cereal. And I go, what are you doing? Well, there was no paper towels. So I'm like, but that's a hot pad. You go find a towel, no? So, I mean, I use that as an example. I was like, oh my, yeah, we are in trouble.
Or jumping off of roofs, or, you know, playing with gasoline and fire.
Oh, Kathy, I know, you poor thing. Holy cow. No. We're all praying for each other, aren't we?
Yes.
This is where the entitlement comes in, because it's like people have not heard no their whole lives, and then they go into a job and a boss says no, and they're like, why are you telling me that? Or they go, there's something else, and someone's saying no to them all of a sudden, and they're not used to it, they're not comfortable with it, and they don't know how to respond to it. And I see it, like, even in my generation, a lot of people, even social media encourages this me, everything's about me. So when it's not, I don't really know how to behave. Like, and I have had to learn, like, other people parent the way that they feel is best and the way that they can handle. And I really genuinely try, like, I do not judge the way other people deal with their kids, but I just feel alone in the way I'm doing it. And I hate that. I hate that I sometimes feel judged because.
Do you ever question what you're doing?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
only because I feel so alone. Because when I'm putting my child in timeout, or when we go to someone's house, like I really try to stay on top of her behavior. And if I can see she's doing something and I'm talking to somebody, they'll go, "Oh, just leave her, she's fine." But I realize these are the most important years. And if I make her think it's okay to like break somebody's stuff or play with things she shouldn't, I'm doing a disservice to her, and she's more important than my conversations at the moment. Like if it's something I'm really worried about, I'll stop and say, I need to help, or I need to step in there and tell her what not to do. But I've had people say to me, "Oh, you're really strict. You're a really strict mom." But I love the crap out of my kids. Like I cuddle them and kiss them. And I always tell them after discipline, like you said, Bridgetti, I say, I ask, why did you go on timeout? And she'll tell me, and I'll say, what could we do next time? And she'll tell me what she could do next time. And then I say, Mommy loves you so much. I just want you to grow up and to know how to be kind or how to be responsible and make good decisions. And then we pray, and she says, "Dear Jesus, please help me to have listening ears, an obedient heart, and a good attitude." And then she goes and everything's fine. And then I say, "I forgive you and I love you." And I just think she'll need to know that when she's 15 or 25.
Yes, Sarah, you know what? I think you're doing everything right. You know,
I wouldn't
try not to question yourself. No, you're doing it right. I wish I could go back and do things differently. And I think, Bridgetti, yes, we all parent the way our parents parented us. Or Donna-Marie, you were saying that.
No chance. I will never parent them.
Or we do the complete opposite.
Yeah, the opposite.
So, you know, I wish I could go back because I feel like I parented the way my parents did. I wish that I had the patience, more wisdom like you have, Sarah, you know, to be able to do, you know, calm yourself enough when a child really angers you.
I don't know, but yeah.
Well, we're human too. We can't forget that.
There's no one brilliant way to discipline your kids. I think everybody's different. Everybody's setup's different. There's no one magical formula, and each child is different as well, and they all come with different challenges.
That's right.
I think
Mark and I talked about, you know, about how we were as kids, and our children are complete opposite of how we were as kids. You know, now we have you know, different circumstances with ours, but they're just completely different children. And where Mark and I would have responded to the way, at least the way we parent, our kids don't respond the same way.
Right.
The other thing I'd like to mention is, don't you guys find that if you as parents, I mean, this is the other challenge with discipline. If both parents are not on board with the method of discipline, if your spouse undermines you, if your spouse does not support you, it's so hugely challenging, you know. And one thing I've often talked about is, even if your spouse disagrees with the way you did, don't undermine the parent in front of the children, because you're literally inviting trouble into your home if you undermine your spouse's decision. It's okay to talk about it behind closed doors, you know, after the fact, and review the way that you would have handled the situation. But for a parent to actually walk in on the other parent and undermine them in front of the children is so bad for the kids, isn't it?
Yes.
It's terrible.
Why am I always the odd one out? You see, I don't think, I think that if the other parent is making a very bad decision, and you know that the other parent's making a bad decision, I feel like I couldn't let that decision go on because it's not up to my discipline. It might be over the top. And if I feel it's over the top, I would stop it there and then, even if that meant doing it in front of the child. I'd find a way to do it, to change that discipline method, but I wouldn't just let it ride just because I didn't want to say it in front of the child. Does that
Well,
make sense?
I guess it depends how much of a team you are. Like with my husband and I, and it depends how bad it is what's happening. Like if I just think something could have been dealt with a little bit differently, I'll mention it to my husband later. And thankfully, because we're a good team, when it comes to parenting, he will say okay and try and change. Whereas, and then he will often go to Poppy and say, "Daddy shouldn't have done that. I'm really sorry." But if your partner is going to do that, I agree. It's important for the child to know it wasn't okay to be treated that way.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, I think children deserve a lot of respect as well as parents, and I think that I think you do earn respect. I think that the child needs to respect you enough to listen to you, but you also need to respect the child. You know, there's too much of this in back when I was a kid. There was all this do as I say, don't ask questions, don't chat back, you know, decades ago when the dinosaurs were out. And you didn't ask questions, you just did. I understand that because you're listening to somebody tell you what to do and you are a child. But in this day and age, parents make a lot of rash decisions. They're highly stressed. They've got highly stressed jobs. Mothers used to stay at home a lot, and now they're having to work. There's a lot more, you know, there's monetary situations going on, and women have to find the extra money to bring into the home. There's all these factors about the stress. I don't think parents know who's the chosen disciplinarian anymore, because the mother sometimes, you know, every case is different, but sometimes the mother is out trying to earn the money, and then no one knows who's doing the parenting, and then it kind of gets mashed together. So
do you guys think that men today tend to take a step back in the discipline part more than they used to?
I think it depends on the man.
I think very often men do abscond that duty. There's still this. I've seen it in other families, you know, where men feel, well, I pay the bond, you know, that's my job in the family. And they become the ATM dad, as they call them. You know, he feels as long as he can bring home the bacon, as long as he can pay the bond, then he's done his job, you know. They fail to understand that there's a lot more to parenting than just bringing home the paycheck at the end of the month. And Donna-Marie, I wanted to pick up on what you said there. I totally get where you're coming from, I think. I mean, if a parent is in the process of disciplining, and that discipline could lead to harming the child, your first priority as a parent, and especially as a mom, would always be to ensure the overall welfare of your child. So I think if I had to walk into a situation where my spouse was disciplining to the extent that it was harmful to my child, I would absolutely say something. So even though I totally feel carry on, Donna-Marie.
Even if it's not, it may not be coming to physical harm. It might be something like emotional harm. You might know that the way that they're disciplining the kids causes massive, huge emotional effect that will play out shortly afterwards, because you know it's like a cycle. And I like to break cycles like that in the bud. You know, none of this I'll wait because it's not like, I like to sort of nip it in the bud. That's wrong. Even as an adult, that won't be happening, so you can stop right there. I'll take over from here. I just think that everyone's circumstances are different, and there is no one magical way. But if people, and even the children are different, the spouses, the partners are different. It's so difficult. But you know, when kids are growing up, and I'll look at the way dads today were brought up, maybe they were let off with a lot of things from their mother. You know, men, we love men. We all love men here, don't we? We do.
Yes, we do.
But, you know, some, when they're growing up as little boys, they do get away with absolute mayhem and murder. And then they grow up. Don't forget, we're trying to nurture them to, when they grow up, they're going to have someone to look after, a wife or a partner and then their children eventually, if they have any. So it's up to us as well, the way we're bringing up our sons and daughters, as to how they're going to treat their kids.
Yeah.
So it's so hugely important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Tim and I were talking about this last night on our date night, because we were talking about discipline, even though you're not supposed to talk about kids on date night. And we were talking about how Abel, like, if I let him treat me however he wants, if I let him demand things from me and hit me or like be rude to me or disrespectful, he's going to grow up and treat a woman that way. Like, if I let him think he can just treat me like I'm his slave, that's how he's going to treat his wife. And we have a responsibility to tell him that's not okay. And on the flip side, if Poppy was with someone who treated her like that, I would tell her to leave. Like, so I'm not about to let my son become the kind of guy that I wouldn't let my daughter, you know, like, it's, you're right.
Absolutely.
These
guys are going to grow up. And
I try to go ahead.
I'd like to come back to one thing. I want to just back up to what Kathy said earlier. So in some countries or states, you basically can have your parental powers taken away from you, where the child can call social services. So how can we be a little bit more creative in terms of discipline without creating a situation where the child can go and call Childline because you're using corporal punishment? You ladies have any suggestions on that? I mean, one thing that I would like to recommend, I've never had to live within those constraints in South Africa, but one thing I would possibly recommend is some kind of consequence where they would feel it in a very real way, you know, withdrawing something that they truly, truly love or is passionate about. That's my one suggestion. So what else have you ladies got on the table, you know, with dealing situations like that?
Well, I've never had to deal with anything like that. I mean, I've never had to deal with social services or anything, but from sort of things I've heard in the paper and on the television, I feel like social services either dive in at the deep end on the wrong subject. So they'll go and help a child that doesn't need the help. The parents are fine. They've probably just shouted at them. You know, I think they go over the top, the social services, and they can wreck families' lives and the relationships between the mother, father, children. And then on the other scale, you get children that do need the help, that are literally abused, and social services seem to get it wrong again. And don't go in and help. So I think there needs to be a look at how social services work and how they gather their information. And yes, I think children do need a phone line to ring and somewhere to go for someone to talk to. But let's be sensible here about, you know, what that content is when the child does ring up. You know, my mum took my iPhone off me. You know, things like that they're not a big deal, are they? Social services do not need to be diving into people's lives through, you know, information that's not valid. And they need to look after the children who are vulnerable and listen and watch out for them. So I just think there's something there that's just not working at all. But yeah.
Mary, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, in the United States, Kat probably can attest to this, and you will hear this from a lot of different places, that some of the services in the United States and probably in the different parts of the world need an overhaul, you know, and need some help. I think that, like Donna-Marie said, you know, and there are some really bad situations where a service is needed and called in, and it is needed sometimes, but definitely can you all hear the crickets?
Crickets, everything.
They are dating or partying or something. I don't know what they're doing.
I think it's you that's on safari.
So, but definitely, the evaluation needs to be done very gently. It's kind of like, your mom and dad taking a couple of deep breaths where they go in and rush and spank you, that kind of, let's just calm down and look at the entire situation. Now, in the school systems, cameras would be really helpful. We do have them in a lot of places. But when it comes to things like that and the bullying and, things between teachers and children and things like that, I think that, that would be helpful. And it depends on the situation, if it was needed or not. But I do think that our system is, some of our systems are needing an overhaul. And children who think that children who threaten their parents with, well, if you do that, I'm going to call 911. Well, then maybe the people at 911 or the police department needs to know that the child has thinking like that. So they can help to teach the child that's really not okay. And that's a tough situation to be in.
It is, Mary, thinking about, our experience and stuff that, we've been through children and youth several occasions, because our children are adopted from foster care. So, we started that long ago. And I absolutely see, at least the way children and youth is run in our county, that it needs an overhaul, totally. But the thing is, we've been put in a situation where, and if a kid reports whatever at a school, somebody in authority, they have to report it to children and youth. They can't question whether the child is lying, whether the child is making it up, or whatever it might be. And then children and youth will come out and investigate. But what I feel is, yes, okay, they'll come out and investigate a scratch. But then there's someone who's literally being beaten and it bruises and whatnot, and they still fail the child.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's broken.
Yes, where they didn't go out and investigate when they were supposed to.
Yeah.
That people were told of, they saw the bruises, they saw this. And then the next thing you hear, a report of a child who was actually murdered by their parents. This is the stuff that infuriates me. They're wasting time on a stupid little scratch, whatever, when there's kids who legitimately need the service. So where are we failing? How are they failing?
Well, you have to be able to discipline your child, or let's say, what's a better word to use? Redirect your child, okay, in the correct direction that is for their best good, without, that shouldn't be anybody's business. I mean, because the way you are going to direct your child may be different than your next door neighbor or somebody down the street, But if we do keep teaching the whole thing about, okay, you can make, and I have raised my kids this way, Bridgetti, you can make all these different choices, but there's always a consequence to a choice that you make. And you've got to start thinking about that even when they're little. I got to think about, okay, Mom said no cookie before dinner. I'm going light here, okay? Mom said no cookie before dinner, but I go into the pantry and sneak that cookie. Well, your inner drive, that human instinct drove you to get that cookie more than common sense came in. So what should what is an appropriate punishment, do you think? Sometimes my mom has said that's always a good thing to use. Ask a kid, you tell me, what should your punishment be? Let them pick it. It's a tactic to use, but we definitely have to keep drilling and telling and saying. There are consequences to every decision you make, because that never stops. That's eternal for all life. So it's no different today than it was when all of us were kids. That's something
I'm constantly drilling into my kids, is saying there's a consequence. So when Josiah decided to jump off the roof onto the trampoline, there's a consequence. Now the problem here is he landed okay. So now in his mind, we're good.
He's
There's
Batman.
Yeah.
Spider-Man.
Yeah. I think
You know.
I think it's a tough one because when you have a toddler like I do, there aren't really a lot of consequences, and like you do, Mary, there aren't a lot of consequences other than like you can't play on the trampoline now, like
Yeah.
or. But I listened to a really good teaching thing called Loving Your Kids on Purpose, and he talks about making age appropriate responses to behavior.
Yes.
He
Yeah.
told this
And explaining to them, you know, Sarah, like you're doing, constantly explaining to them, talking to them like they're a little bit older than what they are, but keep explaining to them and explaining to them, not do as I say, don't do as I do, but actually explaining to them. And I do know that if I can bring my voice down underneath his angry voice and his frustration, if I can bring my voice down, kind of, you know, put my hands, you know, like touch him, and then it usually deflates the situation immediately or very soon. So there's no freaking out, screaming on the floor, having a complete meltdown. This seems to work really well. And then I can redirect.
There's definitely a need there for some kind of a balance when it comes to dealing with situations with social services. Kathy, just picking up on the example that you mentioned now, with your son jumping off the trampoline or the roof onto the trampoline. So there's many ways that could have gone horribly wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just imagine if he had miscalculated and he hurt himself, right? Mm-hmm. You could possibly become liable for child endangerment because you provided the trampoline, you know, just as by way of example. Or he could be, cape on him. Yeah, or for example, he could be in a bad space with you and he could say, well, my mom told me to do it, you know, and social services can get the wrong end of the stick and you minus your child. I mean, these are things that really need an overhaul.
And this is, you know what, Bridgetti, this is actually the fear that I have now in my head based on what has happened with us. This is the fear in the back of my head, is that at any moment they could do something like that, or, you know, they get hurt and hey, you know what? And here we are adoptive parents. Okay. And adoptive parents from foster care seem to get a bad rap because of, you know, different situations where they've heard that adoptive parents beat their kids, you know, their adopted kids. They killed them. We had a local family not too far from us in Reading that actually killed their daughter. You know, so that's the stuff. Then they start scrutinizing us more. And, you know, that's the way I feel like my power has been completely taken away.
Well, every decision you make, Kathy, is full-on beautiful parenting decisions. You absolutely love your kids with a passion, and I love the way you really fight for them and stick up for them. And to me, that mother's love is 100%. So I don't think you need to live in fear of what could happen with a phone call, because that I'm glad that system's in place for children to go to. I'd rather it be there than not be there, but I don't want you to worry too much about your situations, because your situations are teenagers doing their thing and you're being the great parent that's saying, well, I'll have less of that.
And she's saying no.
And
yeah, you're actually saying no.
And if anyone would ever try to take your kids away for trying to protect your own kids, Kathy, then hey, that's what I was talking about before, where it needs an overhaul. But you're doing everything right.
See, that's the thing is, like, we have this, like you said, it's nice that we have this system in place for kids who need it.
Yeah.
But that's where I feel like it's been completely swapped, where kids who truly need it are not being heard, because the ones who really don't, they're focusing on that crap. You know, I feel like too many kids who really need it have been failed. So I have no confidence in the system whatsoever that it's going to help a child who truly, truly needs it.
Right.
Hey, y'all, I don't want to interrupt. I've got to go. I'm sorry. I want to say bye.
Bye,
We actually do need to wrap up. Mary, take care.
All right, love you. Bye.
Bye, Mary.
Bye.
I just wanted to quickly read a message from Melissa, who's been leaving some really good comments in the comment section. But one thing she touched on was about how she discovered mindfulness and personal development when her kids were young, and it helped her to stop stressing and stop yelling. And I think that's a really important part of parenting, is also being quite aware of our own issues, and are we passing them on, and what can we do to make sure that we're not disciplining our kids out of our own stuff. I think that's a responsibility that we have, to not hand our issues down through generations. And the other thing she talked about was giving two choices. And I've noticed with Poppy that works really well as well, saying you can do this or you can go in timeout. It's really up to you. Because kids like to feel like they have some power, and they can choose the horrible option, or they can choose to do what you're asking them to do, but it kind of puts the responsibility back on them. So thank you, Melissa, for commenting that, because I actually really agree with that.
Thank you, ladies. We really do need to wrap up our show for today, unfortunately. I think it's such a hot topic. We could carry on for another hour, couldn't we? Kathy, I'm going to ask you, what are the things as a mom, as an adoptive parent, what are the things you would like to see changed?
Oh, boy, this is a loaded question. Again, I would like to see things changed as far as, how people view adoptive parents, how these agencies view adoptive parents. But what I'd really like to see is I'd really like to see people take more of an active role in what their kids are doing. Mainly when these kids are in social media, it could just be totally destructive. You don't even know what's going on behind the scenes. Luckily, Hannah will actually, tell me some things that are going on, especially if someone has bullied her or whatever. Luckily, I have that. But there are kids who they don't say a word. And then the parents are completely shocked when their kid either, I don't know, commits suicide or something. Do you know what I mean? Parents need to start taking a more active role in what their children are doing. And that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Kathy. Donna-Marie, from your side, if you had the opportunity to go back, because your children are teenagers now, is there anything that you feel you did right, or anything you would like to have done slightly differently, looking back? Your sound is off, Donna-Marie.
I was just saying, you're really going to ask me that now on a closing title? That's way too. Yeah, I can't think like that at the minute. I just think to discipline at an age that they're at. So change your discipline for the age relative that they're at. Look at each child individually. Have a word with yourself and see if what you've actually said makes sense. Because sometimes us parents just make a decision. Later on, we think, was that actually fair, that decision?
Right. So keep it age appropriate.
Reevaluate yourself as a parent, change it to age appropriate, and communication always open, as always, with the child.
And sometimes one has to adjust that, isn't it? Because what may have worked for a period may stop working because of circumstances. So be prepared to reevaluate the way that you discipline on an ongoing basis, because there's no one size fits all for any child.
That's right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Sarah, do you have any final words in closing?
Any mom, really little kids, I just want them to feel like they don't need to be afraid of their children, and that and just that not to parent out of guilt or fear, because they're not empowering emotions. They're actually you're going to make decisions based out of a negative place, and that's not in your best interest or the best interest of the child. Just think about them as they're adults and what you want them to know and how you want them to be as they grow up, and try and implement that now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Ladies, I think this was a thorny issue that we tackled today, but one that needed a voice in any case, it's something that affects all families. None of us can escape the issue of discipline. If you're a parent, and even if you're not a parent, some of us are aunts or uncles, or we're all part of a global family anyway. So whether we like it or not, discipline is a topic that will affect us in some form or the other. We're out of time, ladies. So I don't have time to even delve into what we're going to be discussing next week, but I'm going to leave it in the comments. We'll leave that in the comments. So thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who's joined us today, who's taken the time out. Love you all. Love you, ladies. And goodbye for now.